Welcome to the Zelos podcast. This week, well, I'm still your host, Rocky Snyder, but I've got Kennedy Hill in the house. He is Strength and Performance Director for the Maine Celtics, the G League for the Boston Celtics. But before we get underway, remember this summer, July 16th to the 19th, the NSCA's National Conference is happening in Kansas City, Missouri. I'll be presenting on Wednesday and Friday during the week, and I'm hoping you can join me there. And if you can't, well, maybe consider going to Perform Better. Their functional summits are happening in Chicago in June, in Long Beach in July, and Providence, Rhode Island in August. And you can catch me in August at Providence. And, well, if travel just doesn't work for you, check out my website, rockysnyder.com, where we have continuing education workshops online, in person, blogs, podcasts, and more. You can even pick up a copy of my book, Return to Center, Strength Training to Realign the Body, Recover from Pain, and Achieve Optimal Performance. While you're online, go to setanticcollege.com, get your master's or bachelor's in strength conditioning. And you can even add RS10 in the code for 10% off tuition today. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Hit that subscribe button and enjoy the show. Kennedy, I appreciate your time for coming on, and I can't tell you how thrilled I am to actually have somebody from the Celtics organization with me, because I grew up only a couple times that I actually go into the Boston Garden, but this was the era of Bird and McHale and Parrish and Ainge and Johnson and eventually Walton too. But so to have someone from your organization on is a thrill and a highlight. So first of all, welcome to the Zealous podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
And dude, you have gone all over the place. When I look at your resume and where you've worked, I have a feeling you've got this dart in your inside pocket, and every now and then you're like, "Oh, I'm kind of getting antsy. Let's pull that dart out, throw it against the map that's on the wall across the room, and wherever it lands, that's where I'm going to go." I like, how did you? Yeah, there's Indianapolis, I think there's Texas, there's the Carolinas, and of course New England. Like, give us an idea of what inspired you to take the path that you're on now.
Yeah, you could pretty much sum it up that way. Just taking a dart and throwing it and seeing where it lands. That's kind of the mentality that I felt like I had to have, coming into this. I decided to get into strength and conditioning and study strength and conditioning um, about halfway through college. Originally, my plan was to study economics, um, and then take that into potentially some kind of law enforcement career, I think is what I wanted to do. But then like somewhere along the way, I was just like, you know what? I think it'd be pretty cool to work with athletes for a living. And so, at that point in time, I was playing football in college and just kind of thought back to like why I would want to do that and like what I would enjoy about, working with athletes. And um, it made me think about high school, my high school career and the strength and conditioning program that we had in high school. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention and recognize my high school strength coach, whose name is Brian Neese. He's been at Brownsburg High School for might be like 15 years now. It's been a long time, probably longer than that. So I mean, to me, he's a legend, and I would say he's the reason why I got into strength and conditioning, just because of the program that he built for us in high school. He started out using, a small, maybe I don't know, maybe a couple hundred square foot room that we worked out in. And when I go back to the high school now, he's got, 15 plus power racks. He's got elite form on every single rack. I mean, he's got a multi-million dollar weight room. And that's just been from him just, you know, staying the course and being there for so long. And so, yeah, the program that he put us through and just like how he helped me, I don't think I would have had a chance to play college football had it not been for him, because I was, 5'6", 130 pounds, going into high school. So wasn't much of a chance for me if it weren't for
Uh-huh.
strength and conditioning. So yeah, I would definitely credit him. And then just like, some of the other influences I had along the way were my college strength coach at Taylor University. Um, and he was great just because he had, a pretty solid background himself. He had worked for a couple professional teams, a couple different colleges, high major colleges as well. And so at a school like Taylor, which is a small program, right? Small school program, NAIA program in Northern Indiana. We don't have a lot of resources there. And for someone like him who had that background to come in and lead our strength and conditioning program, we were all really excited about that because, we felt like that was going to be, that development piece was going to be big for us and just getting better and hopefully having a better season. And it wasn't my last season, unfortunately, but the season after I came back and I coached, and he was still there. He was still running our strength and conditioning program. Actually, that was kind of my first, like, taste at running, at helping run a strength and conditioning program because he knew I wanted to get into the field. And so as I was serving as the running backs coach, he was like, hey, go ahead and take care of the strength and conditioning program too. Here's the program, go ahead and run the workouts and all of that. So that was kind of my first introduction into that. And so that first year that I coached, like I said, it wasn't my last year. I wish it was, but the first year that I coached was our best season at Taylor in a long time. And so, it was our season, a season where we had the least amount of injuries. Guys were performing really well, putting up really good numbers in the weight room and all around. So yeah, I would say like that's what got me started. And then it's a whole nother story as to how I got to where I am currently. So
Well, before you share that, because
yeah.
definitely want to know that path, you kind of alluded to in my interpretation as there was this one moment that occurred with your experience in high school with your phenomenal strength coach and then your college strength coach and so on, but somewhere halfway through your college career of thinking about econ and joining some type of police force and so on, or law enforcement. Was there one pinnacle moment when you were like, um, I'm really interested in training athletes? Because you mentioned that was it when you were given the running backs to train, or was it some other time in that kind of that era?
Yeah, actually, there was. I'll leave the name of the school out of it because I actually transferred from this school. So, um, but the school that I initially went to out of high school, the college that I initially went to out of high school, um, let's just say that the strength and conditioning program was not up to my standard, having come from the
Excellent.
high school that I came from, right? And
Being
the
very
program that I came
diplomatic,
from.
very tactful. I like that. You're very, very modest and nice. So it was a piece of crap
uh,
compared to what you're used to.
it
You're like,
was
what the hell is this all
I'll
about?
yeah, I can summarize it by saying our off-season training consisted of CrossFit workouts. Okay,
No,
I'm
I
not
know.
bashing CrossFit, right?
I hear you.
CrossFit is people that do CrossFit are very brave. I'll say that. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Especially
it
if you're a
wasn't for
CrossFit
me.
athlete, right? Yes.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a whole thing in and of itself, right? You have to train for CrossFit to be good at like CrossFit just it doesn't work for athletes, right? Um so yeah, we were doing a lot of that and it just didn't sit right with me. And so I'm like there's got to be a better way. And I'd like to learn that way. And if I go into this as a career, I want to take it as far as I can. I want to work at the highest possible level that I can. So yeah.
Ah, I love it. Yeah, well, that's how we true our compass, right? How we steer the course and navigate to the direction we want to go, not just where we want to aspire to, but where we don't want to be. So, what a gift that is, too.
Yeah.
Okay, so you leave school and you go through a graduate program or a graduate assistant. You're like, let's just kind of cut through a little bit of your academic career, and what started to springboard you in the direction that you're in right now with the Celtics.
Yeah, so just kind of learning like what it would look like to become, a strength and conditioning coach or get into the sports performance industry. My college strength coach helped me out a lot with that. He kind of just like laid out like this is typically what, what to expect, what you're going to go through. And so the first thing he said was it'd probably be helpful to get an internship and then eventually consider doing a graduate assistantship wherever you can, with whatever university. He had tried to help me get into a couple places, but at that time, I mean, it was really difficult to get those positions, those graduate assistantships, because the field was really growing at that point in time. And now it's like a lot of places you can't even be a GA in a lot of places anymore for whatever reason. But it's even more difficult to get those now. But yeah, so he was, saying be good to do an internship, graduate assistantship, and then hopefully after that, you have enough experience to get yourself a full-time job. And so that's exactly what I did. Graduated from Taylor, and then was able to secure an internship at Exos in Frisco. And so out there, and to me, I'd heard about Exos before I went out there. I had seen the whole welcome to the draft or whatever show they put on. They put on a show, I think, every year on the ESPN
Yeah.
around the time of the NFL draft, and they profile how guys are getting ready for the combine. And so, watching those was also another kind of like, moment where I was like, oh, that looks I'd like to do that. If I'm gonna
Yeah.
get into this, like I think I'd like to try it. I'd like to get to that point where I'm working with guys like that, helping them
Did you
train
ever
for the
go to
combine.
did you ever go to the Maine facility in Arizona?
I did, yeah, yeah. I
Awesome,
did. I
isn't
got
it?
to see that. It's incredible. Yeah.
Incredible.
Once you see that, it's just like it's over with, right? Like you're like, this is it. I gotta get to this.
Dude,
So
sincerely.
yeah,
Sincerely. And now
so
when you say Frisco, you don't mean San Francisco. You were in Texas, right?
no, yeah, Frisco, Texas. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
North
yeah,
North
yeah. Okay.
North Dallas. So yeah, I actually had a guy that I played football with at Taylor. He got a job at Exos. I think on the performance consultant side and helped me get that internship. And so landed in Dallas during their combine prep season. So I got to see all of that, right? Got to be a part of all of that. Um, and got to, see the nuts and bolts of how they help guys, take a tenth off of their 40 and help them make $1 million extra, whatever it may be, which is really cool, right? It's a really cool thing when you think about it like that. And the great thing about that program was is they want you to and they push you to be really hands-on, even as an intern, even as somebody that's just getting started. By the end of the internship, they expect you to be you know running training sessions with whoever. It could be with their NFL vets, it could be with the college athletes, it could be with the high school athletes, definitely with the youth athletes. And so you have different cycles of professional athletes and college athletes coming through there at different times, and they expect you to be able to work with them and gain the confidence in standing in front of a group like that. So that was a great experience. And then was able to take that and kind of parlay that into a graduate assistantship at Tarleton State, and took that opportunity. Say Tarleton State, most people probably are going to have zero idea what that school is or where it is, but it's now a Division I school in kind of West Central Texas. They're in the WAC conference. They're kind of bringing the WAC back with
Mm.
football and everything. And so at the time that I was there, we were Division II. But I had never heard of Tarleton State before. The strength coach approached me and was like, "Hey, I got a graduate assistantship role, open. If you're interested in applying for it." I was like, sure, I'll look into it. And it is a good school. Tarleton's a good school. They were a great school athletically. They were just dominant at the Division II level, and that's what helped them, climb up to Division I. Had a great strength program. The head strength coach at the time or director at the time was Rod Cole. And so he had spent 14, 15 years working for Bill Snyder at Kansas State. And so that's where, he got his experience, and then he had been at Tarleton State at that time for about 8 years. So built up a pretty good program there. Um, so got a lot of autonomy working in that program, working with on my own, working with volleyball, women's basketball, and then assisting with everything else, right? Had some autonomy over the interns there and all of that. Um, so got a lot of leadership, or more so leadership experience there. And then right after that, graduated with that, with my master's in kinesiology, and then was able to get a job, full-time job as a head strength coach, whatever you want to call it, but um, strength coach at a high school in Houston, Second Baptist High School in Houston. So it's a
Nice.
private school down there. Yeah, did that for a year, just kind of helped build that program up. They were kind of, starting to build that from the ground up. Was trying to work on a way to establish like a class system, right? So like actual class periods for the kids to come in and do, and participate in strength and conditioning, mainly for the athletes, but they wanted to try and organize that. So, was working with administration and different kinds of groups of people to try to put that together. But did that for a year, and then kind of wanted to get back into college. High school is great, but I just wanted a different challenge. I wanted the challenge of working at the college level, and like my ultimate goal was to work. At that time, my ultimate goal was to work in Division 1 athletics, Division 1 football, primarily. So I was willing to do whatever would help me get to that. So I knew I had to get some more college experience, and so got an opportunity through going to the CSCCA conference, right, every year, and just kind of developing connections, which is a great way to, get different roles, get the different roles that you want. So through that, met some connections, ended up being able to walk into a role at North Carolina Central. So moved from Houston, Texas to Durham, North Carolina, and worked there for a year, oversaw volleyball, softball, helped with football, helped with baseball, the typical, college job, college assistant job.
Sure.
Uh, did that for a year, and now, COVID hits, right? And so COVID hits at the end of my first year there. We all get sent home, right? So we're still doing our training and stuff remotely. And it comes time, everything's starting to open up again. Everything's starting to open back up, and like everybody's starting to go back to school, planning on going back to school. We're all planning on going back to work. And so this is kind of, one of the dark sides of the profession is like, sometimes our roles are pretty fragile, right? Sometimes they're there, and then another year, another administration comes in, that job might not be there, right? They might want to take that, resource and allocate it somewhere else. And so that's what they decided to do at North Carolina Central. And that happened to a lot. I knew a lot of people that
Mm.
that happened to at that point in time, where, assistant strength and conditioning coaches, young ones that are kind of at the bottom of the totem pole, like you come back and it's like, hey, we had to cut the role because of budget cuts because of COVID. And so, that happened to a lot of people that I knew. So that was tough. That was a tough, I mean, that was a tough time for everybody, right?
Sure.
Um, and I hope and pray we never, ever, ever have to go back into anything like that ever again. But on the bright side of that, kind of on my way out of North Carolina Central, before I even knew that, all of that was going to happen, was having a conversation with one of my buddies that I played high school ball with, and he was on staff with Wake Forest football, and he was about to move on from that position. And so he had called me, knowing that I was right down the road. He was like, "Hey, if I leave this position, would you be interested in, interviewing to replace me?" I'm like, "Absolutely, yes, I
Sweet.
would." So,
Nice.
so that, right there, put that, kind of put that goal of mine right on the horizon of getting into, high major college football. Um,
Love it. I love it. So
yeah,
you moved into that spot?
yeah, moved into that spot right after the role at North Carolina Central ended. And so just moved right back down the road to Winston-Salem. The thing is, I had done a small, brief little internship with Wake Forest football with him while he was there. So I'd
Oh,
already
cool.
kind of developed some relationships there, but and so they remembered that when that role opened up, and so that played out, pretty well. Um, and then went in as like the number 5 strength coach on staff, right? Did the first season there. First season, that was COVID year. It was a weird year. No fans in the stands or anything like that. But like everything we did to kind of keep the program going, like we had to do a lot just to, kind of keep the program afloat. And so had to work really, really hard that year. But at the end of that year, we had some staff changes and had the staff shuffle around a little bit. And the guy that was the associate director ends up becoming the director because our director that hired me goes to Vanderbilt. And so once the associate director became the director, he brought me up to be his associate director.
Nice.
So got a promotion at the end of that first year. So did 2 years at Wake Forest. Um, and and yeah, after that, got an opportunity to just go back home, and
Back to
step
Indiana.
into back to Indiana, back to Indianapolis. And I mean, I hadn't been back to Indy like, for an extended period of time in over 7 years. So the opportunity to go back and actually be director of a program and run my own program was a really attractive thing. Um, so yeah, that's something that I wanted to do and wanted to be back home, and that was the best opportunity available. So took that opportunity. A lot of people would look at that and be like, that doesn't make any sense, but that's just what I wanted to do at the time.
Okay.
So did that, ran that program for 2.5 years, and then towards the end of that is when I was, starting to realize, like, I think I just want to put myself on a different trajectory right now as far as, I still want to attain that goal of working at the highest level possible. And so I had been having more conversations with people who worked at the professional level, worked in professional sport, just trying to get a feel for what that, looks like and what that is. And from what they were saying, to me, it sounded really attractive. And so just started looking for roles that I could step into. And the role with the Celtics opened up. And when it opened up, I threw my name in the hat and it worked out. Just made it through the made it through the interview gauntlet,
Eh,
and here I
Man,
am.
Kennedy, that's fantastic, and congratulations for being successful in every direction you've gone in so far. That's very commendable, and I love it. And here you sit, just working with some world class athletes, and just moving your way just through I won't say up the ladder necessarily, because the ladder I think is more sideways depending upon your viewpoint, because there's those people that really love working with the top level athletes. Others really
Yeah,
enjoy, just get as much thrill working with developing athletes and those that are in between. So but
yeah,
but
yeah.
it is fantastic. I love this. So, and then so you started with the Maine Celtics. Of course, that's
Yep.
the Boston Celtics G League organization. And this
Hmm.
was you're going into what, you've been there a year now,
Been there,
second
yeah,
year.
coming up on a year, going into the second. Yep. So
And so
yeah. Go
you
ahead.
were
Sorry.
there for no last year. For those that don't realize it, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I lost track of time, but it was last year you guys won the G League championship, was it not?
No,
2 years
they were in the finals. They were in the finals. The Maine Celtics were
in
in
the
the
finals.
finals and lost to the OKC Blue.
Damn.
Yeah,
Okay,
lost to the
sorry to
OKC
bring up a
Blue in three
painful memory.
games.
All right.
I mean, I wasn't here yet, so
Okay.
yeah, I wasn't a
You
part of it.
came in
Yeah, I came
afterwards.
in right. Yeah, I came in right after that. But I feel the extended, associated pain with that,
I
I guess.
imagine.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so, and okay, and of course you're with the Celtics, but right now the NBA championship's happening, and by the time this
yeah.
airs, it'll still be going on. And it's
Hmm.
OKC, those
Yeah.
damn bastards from OKC, and with your home, your home team of the Pacers. I'm imagining if you grew up in
Yeah,
Indiana,
yeah,
I got to tell you personally, I'm rooting for the Pacers myself. Once the
yeah.
Celtics were out, which was heartbreaking for me, and I'm sure it
hmm
was for you too. But if there's a team I'm going to root for right now, it's the Pacers. So I just got to put it out there. There you
I
go.
uh I get I'm gonna be careful and not claim that I root for anybody other than the Boston Celtics right now. Um
Oh, you're so wiser. You're so much
I
wiser than
can
I am.
but I can say that I'm enjoying this postseason run. I'm enjoying watching, what's going on. A lot of people I think there's a lot of people on the outside looking in that probably aren't even watching the finals right now because you got two small market teams. Like who's even on the Pacers, right? Like a lot of people are just like they have no idea. But like when you actually watch them play and you
They're
watch
amazing.
OKC play, like
Unbelievable.
they play a fun brand of basketball. Like they really
Yeah.
do. So so
So
yeah,
fast.
it's
So
fast.
fast.
Yeah.
But
Fast.
what
They
about
can put
the
up 100. I was gonna say they
oh,
can put up
unbelievable.
140 points. They can hold teams to 90. Like, it's good basketball. So
Yeah. So,
yeah.
well, speaking of good basketball, we'll go back to the Northeast and we'll go up to
Yep.
Maine. Dude,
Yeah.
how are your winters? Like, was that because man, you've been down to Carolinas, you've been down to
I
Texas. Hell,
know.
I
I
know it
know.
gets
I
kind of
got
cold in
warm blooded,
Indianapolis,
man.
but it doesn't get like freaking where
I got
you can
yeah.
get the moisture in your nostrils when it freezes and it cracks in the morning when you wrinkle your nose and you can hear the ice crystals inside your nostrils. Like
Oh yeah.
that's
You
freaking
gotta
cold,
love
and
it.
that's
You
Maine.
gotta love it. Yeah.
So how is
I
that?
it I like to, I like to let the people in Maine know that like winter doesn't bother me. Like I'm from Indiana. Like, like we have winter. It gets cold there. We get snow. So like I like to let them think that. I did get a little warm-blooded, being in Texas and North Carolina. And I think I prefer it. I think everybody prefers warm weather, but it wasn't too bad because I mean, obviously we were there through the thick of it. Um, but the times where it was like really like dumping snow, like February, early March-ish, we were actually on the road quite a bit. So
Yeah.
we were traveling. But there were some times where we got stuck, there were a couple times we got stuck in an airport and because of snowstorms. Um, so it does snow. It snows a lot more than I've ever seen. So I will say that is not as fun. So the winters are long. They're very long up there. It's like, it stayed
Hey,
in the 30s, 40s, 50s
you're putting
until
in your
April.
time, man. That's what you're doing. You're
Yeah.
just putting in some time. And it won't be
Yeah.
there for long.
Yeah.
So talk about traveling a little bit. How many games are in the G League season compared to the NBA?
So if you include the finals, and then you factor in, the first called the first half of the season, which is called the tip-off tournament, you include all those games, I think it's
Okay.
roughly 50 games. So, significantly less games than an NBA season. But those 50 games are condensed into 6 months, 5, 6 months. And so, you'll have some weeks throughout the season where you might be playing 4 games in a week. And those games could be, all at home. They could be half at home, half on the road. You could be going back and forth between traveling, on the road and being at home. So like, it can be, I mean, they call it the G League for a reason, it's a grind, right? It's a grind. So yeah, I mean, you got to be ready for that, you know.
And you've got a wide array of players. Obviously, you've got those that have been drafted and they're trying to make their way up. You've got some players that are coming in from overseas that are trying
Mhm,
to get groomed for the big game for the NBA. And then
mhm.
I don't know, do you get many of the players that are coming back from injury and then move up through? Or is that's kind of a smaller population, would you say?
Um, you mean like guys like coming out of college that were previously injured, or are you talking about guys that are coming from
No, like
the
for us,
NBA
we've
teams?
yeah, NBA teams. Like we've got the Santa Cruz Warriors here in my town, and
Right,
every
right.
now
Okay,
and
okay, okay,
then
okay. Yeah, yeah,
we get some of the starters from the Golden State that just need to get a little bit of playing time, so they come down to
yeah.
Santa Cruz before they're ready to go back to true return to performance.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that doesn't happen all that often. You know, it's only gonna happen with guys that have been out of, you know, they've been out of commission for a long, long time. And so, you know, we'll usually find a way to get those guys some, you know, some scrimmage minutes. Whether that's, you know, we bust down to Boston and practice there. Or yeah, usually that's the case. So so yeah, and then
And
like outside of that, you know, as far as like all the different types of players we get, yeah, like you said, we're getting players from overseas that are coming from overseas leagues. We're getting players that, you know, coming straight out of college. We're getting guys that have played in the NBA, you know, for a couple of years and had an NBA career. So you're getting a wide, you know, players that have a wide range of experience.
and so when it comes to strength conditioning, how much buy-in do you have to put forth with your athletes, and which athletes, which population do you find, if you don't mind sharing, which ones do you
Mhm.
have to um, have more energy toward the buy-in compared to other groups that'll just be like, yeah, whatever you say, coach, we got it.
Um, you probably have to do a little more selling with the vets, with your veterans,
Hmm.
and potentially any guys that you have that have had, you know, an NBA career, right? Spend any amount of time in the NBA. So, you know, I think with those guys, obviously, you know, they're in the G League probably because they're choosing to play to continue because they want to continue their playing career, right? And so it's not to say that like, you know, that's how all of them are, but like those guys that have been in the league or have just been playing professional basketball for a long time, you know, they develop their habits, they develop their routines that they want to stick to for the most part. They figure out what they like, and all of that's fine. Like that's part of our job is to meet those guys where they are, and be flexible with what we provide and you know the approach we take towards them when it comes to, you know, if it comes to lifting, comes to practice, you know, whatever the case may be. You know, we're willing to meet them where they are and be like, okay, well, you know, all of those things, if all those things worked really well for you in the past, let's find a way to continue doing those things to the best of our ability. But maybe because, you know, of our environment and the resources we have, some of those things might not be, you know, as viable as viable of an option, you know, at this point in time. So might have to find another way around it, find a workaround for that. But I would say by and large, like, you know, everybody, even in the G League, right? Everybody's trying to be the best they can possibly be for whatever reason that is. They want to continue their career. They're just coming in and they want to elevate. They want to get a role on an NBA roster. They want to get that NBA contract. They want to get that two-way contract. They want to get that 10-day contract. So a lot of those guys are going to, you know, they're going to come in and they're going to be prepared to work, you know, and work hard and do exactly what it is that you know, ask them to do, so that they can achieve their goals too.
And so when it comes to comparing the G League to NBA, uh, with the
Mm.
size of your roster, how does it compare? Is it relatively the same? Do you guys have a bigger or smaller roster?
Relatively the same. Yeah. 15, 16 guys on the roster. The only thing in the G League is that that number fluctuates a lot more, right?
Yeah.
Um, as far as like the active roster is concerned, it just however many players you have available versus what's going on with two ways or guys that get call ups for 10 days. You know, you could you could have a full roster of 16 ready to go going into a game, and then it could literally be before tip off. Your roster could drop down to 14 because you get a two-way that gets called back, or you get one of your players gets a call up, right? So that's actually happened, to us a couple
Sure.
times, a couple different times. So yeah.
And then with this fluctuation, that's got to be one of the challenges for you when it comes to uh, tracking progress, program design, periodizing, or understanding where this athlete needs to be. Or if you get new players popping in halfway through the season,
Mhm.
then like how do you handle that? What do you do?
Um, I think it's just like, mainly it's how you approach everything coming into it, like knowing that that's an expectation, right? And that that's going to happen, that, your roster at the end of the season could look completely different than it did at the beginning of the season. Knowing that you could have a player show up at your facility the day of a game, right? And they're supposed to be prepared to play, right? Like that night. Um, which it's kind of a cool thing that that we have to be capable of, of handling that. And so, it's just the way that we approach it as an organization, and then also just individually, knowing that, if a guy comes to you last minute, or you get a new guy on the roster, it's just like you have to you have to communicate with that guy. You have to figure out, like where he's been, what he's been doing, right? Like how things were wherever he was coming from, right? Whatever team he was coming from. Explain to him, kind of your rhythm, like whatever my rhythm is, whatever my kind of way of operating is. And then again, just like trying to find those areas of like common ground, and just making sure that you're both on the same page when it comes to the approach that you're going to take towards preparation, helping them prepare for games, helping them prepare for practice, right? Explaining to them the progression of the strength and conditioning program and why we do what we do. And usually when you do that and you communicate really well, like you really don't have issues with buy-in, because again, guys understand what's expected of them, and they understand what they have to do if they want to elevate their career and make it into the NBA.
Sure. So I can see pre-season and postseason conditioning to be relatively the least challenging of creating programs. And what I mean by that
Hmm.
is like you just told me earlier that you've got over 50 games and you're usually doing that in a very condensed period. So I'm thinking
Hmm.
like, game day minus one, game day plus one, all of these different configurations from one week to the next because it's not like
Hmm.
a uniform schedule. It's not like you've got midweek game on Wednesday and then you've got a Friday and a Sunday match, right? It's
Right.
all over the board. So how do you coordinate that? Like with their game schedule and monitoring load in the
Hmm.
weight room as well as on the court. Like when I think of load, I think of just how much the players are going through in terms of volume of work. Like how do
Hmm.
you how do you navigate that?
Yeah, it can be tough. It can definitely be tough, but again, I think it's all about the preparation that you have going into the season. And once we're in season, from a training standpoint, our goal is to we want to progress. We still want to progress in terms of, we want their strength to progress throughout the season. We want, their resiliency, their robustness to progress throughout the season. We want them to continue to get better, but ultimately, we want them to go into each game day feeling like they are capable of performing at their absolute best, right? And feeling as fresh as they possibly can.
Sure.
And so, when you're battling practice, when you're battling travel, um, when you're battling all those things, you definitely have to take those things into account, factor those things in. And so obviously we have, I'll have the base program laid out and what we want to do in an ideal setting. right? In an ideal situation, and like, the amount of load we want to lift on particular days, the amount of reps we want to accomplish. In the G League, you keep it pretty simple, it really is mostly just sets and reps and consistency. And so like I would say that's probably the priority. That's probably priority number one, is just being as consistent as possible. And what goes into that, I would argue that in season it's not as important, as long as you're just consistently getting into the weight, right? You're not letting 2 weeks or a week and a half go by where you haven't gotten a lift in, right? We ask our guys to get really anywhere from 1 to 3 lifts in a week, right? And so ideally we're going for two. And so really it's just finding the days throughout the week, really literally going week by week and just finding the days throughout the week that are going to work best for that guy's schedule, right? And making sure that, their lift days are spaced out well enough. Making sure that, you're not trying to tax them too much by, having them, for example, lift on a game day when it's going to be a late game and we got to travel super early in the morning, right? Like, you're just looking at all of these variables and looking at the situation, be like, okay, when would the best possible time to be to schedule a lift, to schedule a recovery session around practice, or maybe we're getting to a stretch in the season where we have the lift schedule, but we're getting to a stretch of games where like it's really just not feasible. So maybe we need to flip, one of these lifts on its head and just turn it into a recovery lift, right? And just, pull some reps and sets off rather than just continue to go after and just like stick to the program. And, you want to stick to the program as close as you can, but you just have to know that, you're going to have to inject some flexibility into that and be willing to change things up.
Well, I think you kind of answered the question that's been on my mind as you were talking here, and that is how much you rely on instinct, and instinct being the collection of conscious and unconscious information, knowledge, and experience you've gained over the course of your career. And whether it's just a like this thing in the back of your head goes, I don't think it's time we push these guys today. Like, how much do you rely on your
Mhm.
instinctive experiential knowledge? I think what you're just told me is you actually rely on it quite well.
I would like to think so. I would like to think that that helps me out. Having been an athlete, even though I played a different sport, and I didn't play at a professional level. Even with that, like, you kind of just put yourself in their shoes, and you understand what it takes for them to do what they do every day, and just try to imagine, like, okay, like, if I just uh got off of a 4-hour flight across the country, am I really going to want to go straight into the hotel and lift? um, Not always, right? It might, even though it might be good for you, right? Like, you get off of a plane after 4 hours, it might actually be the best thing for you to go get a lift in, right? And I can even tell our guys that, right? I can mention that to them. I can be like, actually, if you want to get a lift in, best time to do is when we get off the plane, so that you don't get off the plane, go into your hotel room, and just get stiff when we got to play a game tomorrow. It might be a good idea to get moving around, right? But we know how we can be, right? How, potentially how we were as athletes, and how your athletes can be. A lot of times that's going to be a tough conversation. That's going to be a tough sell, right? It might be a tough sell. So when you look at a situation like that, just kind of use common sense and be like, well, a full lift might be a tough thing to do. It might be hard to get them to do that. Maybe when we get off the plane, maybe we can get a group of guys to agree to do a recovery session or a mobility session, right? Once we get off the plane, so that we're not just going straight to the room, and laying in the bed and playing the game, and doing that, and getting stiff when we gotta get up and do shoot around at 10 a.m. Right? We got shoot around at 10 a.m. So we got to be ready for that, right? So it's just using
And
that, and trying to, yeah.
So I know some coaches in the league actually do some on game day itself, do some submaximal lifts and loads as a
Mhm.
form of activation. Do you do that yourself with your players from time to time?
Yeah, really. I mean, really, we have to, right? They're with the way that our schedule shakes out, it's almost guaranteed that a a subsect of the team is going to be lifting on game day, right? And it's not that I'm making them do that. In some ways, I am having conversations with players about okay, when do you, if you are you a game day lift guy, right? Did you do that in college? Have you done that in your career as a professional yet? Have you ever tried it? And some of them, they'll be like, "Yeah, I love lifting on game day. I'm good with it." Okay, are you a pregame or a postgame guy? Right, so you have that conversation. Some of them haven't done it, but they want to know about it, right? They'd be like, "Why would I lift on game day? Why would I lift before the game or after the game?" Well, lifting before the game, might be good for you if you're a guy that it kind of takes you a minute to get going, right? Like maybe you're a guy that likes to go back to the room and take a nap after shoot around, right? You like to sleep. All right, cool. Well, once you get up, it might take you a little bit longer to get going. So maybe when you get to the facility, maybe we go through, a scaled back version of a pregame lift just to get, just to get you primed up a little bit better and a little bit faster, right? Than you would if you were just doing a warm up or, post game, right? We know that getting that session in directly after or as close to the end of the game as possible, it can help mitigate the soreness, help mitigate the stiffness that is typically associated with playing 30, 40 minutes in a game, and that it improves just overall recovery. So trying to have those conversations with those guys about that and get them thinking about you know adding that into their regimen so that it might hopefully help them in terms of their ability to recover and be ready for the game that's a day later or the back to back that we're about to go into.
So we spoke a lot, and that's great, by the way, and spot on. I completely hear what you're saying, and it makes complete sense. Go
Mhm.
with what the player and what their situation and their personality is like. But when it comes
Mhm.
to there's strength, and then there's conditioning, and
Mhm.
and oftentimes we just think of the weight room, but there's tissue resiliency. There's a lot of banging of bodies. Like there is a lot of full on contact with very large human beings that
Mhm.
can really produce force. So how do you prepare your players to build more resiliency in the tissue itself? Like, are you taking kickboxing bags, and as they're doing some drills out on the court, you're just kind of giving them a little nudge here or there, or is that something you don't even consider doing? Like, what? How do you build resiliency?
No, yeah, you have to consider that and you have to do that. I think, if you really want these guys to play at an optimal level, you have to consider that and find ways to incorporate that into the training program, right? In every guy's training program. And it's probably going to look a little bit different for each guy, look a little bit different for each guy at each position. And so, when we're training, like it's just looking at the way I see it is it's just looking at the game, looking at how the game is played, right? And it's not necessarily a lot of coaches, a lot of people like to talk about sports specificity and whatnot. It's like it's not necessarily that, but I guess if you want to look at it that way, you can. But I think it's just looking at the game and what does the game require of my guys, right? What does the way that we play? How does the way that we play as a team, right? The type of offense we run, the type of defense we want to, the type of defense we want to run. That? What does that demand of my guys, and how can I help them be more prepared to execute that at a high level? So a lot of those things we're going to find ways to incorporate both, in the weight room and the weight training sessions themselves. And then I'm sure you've seen like, before a game, the guys that are standing under the basket with the performance coach and they're doing all these different, little balance work. They're doing these little, small contact prep drills. And so, we're throwing those things into their pre-court sessions, pushing on them while they're, doing a pal-off press, right? Or
Sure.
having them, hold the ball in their hand and do some balance work while dribbling, right? So, just getting creative. That's where we can kind of get creative and have fun with it. And the
That
guys
sounds
love
like
it,
fun.
right? Yeah, the more creative you get, the more the guys love it. The more it feels like it's actually getting them ready to play the game. The more they love it. Anytime you could turn something into a competition, it's gonna stick. It's gonna work.
I feel like we're just diving in right now, Kennedy, and I know that we're coming up against the clock. So, here, I guess, one of my final questions would be resources for you.
Hmm.
Like, how much support in regards to staffing do you have? Or do you have assistants? Do you have interns? What does it look like compared to? I know what the front office organization is and the NBA level, and I know who's
Hmm.
on the squads there. But when it comes to the G League, are you wearing a hell of a lot more hats than ideally you
Uh,
might want?
I mean, I think that's just part of the role, like that's part of getting your feet wet in the NBA. But I think it's a great challenge because yeah, you wear all the hats, right? And I get to be the strength coach, I get to be the sports scientist, I get to be the pseudo nutritionist, right? Quote unquote nutritionist. I get to wear an ops hat every now and then, right? And helping plan things, right? Helping, something as simple as helping take bags on and off the bus and put them on the plane. Like you, you, you get to inject yourself into every area of the program. And I think it's great because, it kind of gives you a little window into how a whole staff operates at the NBA level, where you have different people that are in charge of those roles. Um, but I think that's really what helps prepare you to step into a role in the NBA because you understand how all of that works kind of on a little microcosmic level. But yeah, I don't have any assistants. I don't have any interns. So I'm ordering the food. I'm running to go pick it up. During practice, making sure guys are getting going in the weight room. I'm setting the catapults out, collecting them at the end of practice, uploading the data. I'm having meetings with the player development coaches, talking about what the practice plan is, and I'm talking to ops about how we're gonna what the logistics are for the next travel for the next road trip. So I mean, like, you're involved in everything.
And we're going to save this as a little snippet of a recording so you can just play it back at your next job interview when they call you up to the main office. Because dang, man, that is some serious experience that you're getting in yourself neck up to your neck in. And there's a side of me that's just like, wow, I'd love to come back to Maine, not in the winter, but some other time, maybe in the
Come
late
on, man.
fall, and just give you a little hand because it sounds
Yeah,
like you could
let me
you could
know.
use a little bit. My gosh. This has been phenomenal, Kennedy. I honestly, I knew it would be. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite a while. I can't thank you enough for agreeing to be on, as well as for the Celtics organization and making this happen. Uh, if people want to follow you, like
Yeah,
obviously there's LinkedIn, which is the great career resource for everybody in our field. But
yeah.
Instagram or social media, what do you do?
I'm really just on Instagram. I can't say that I post a ton, so I'm probably not a super exciting follow. But I am on Instagram, K dot Hill Strength. Pretty easy. If you want to follow me on there, a lot of times I'm just throwing stuff onto my story of what I'm doing, where I am in the world, right? But yeah, I love to connect with people on LinkedIn, have conversations like this, whether it's over the phone, whether it's a more formal interview type, but love connecting with people, love trying to help people that are trying to figure out how to get into just the field of strength and conditioning, or they want to try their hand at getting into the professional level. So if there's anybody out there that just wants to have a conversation about that, I'm more than happy to try and make that happen.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and for the whole industry Thank you, because it's people like you that really help to raise all boats with the tide. So thanks for being on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I enjoyed it. This was great.
And that's another episode in the books. I want to thank Kennedy for coming on, as well as the Celtics organization for allowing this to take place. Remember, this summer, July 16th to the 19th, Kansas City, Missouri. That's where you'll go for the NSCA National Conference. Great place to network and learn. Check it out on nsca.com. Go to performbetter.com. Register for one of their 3-day functional summits, Long Beach, Chicago, or Providence, Rhode Island. And also, hey, check out the website, rockysnyder.com. Blogs, podcasts, CEUs, and just a whole bunch more. And then also my book, Return to Center, Strength Training to Realign the Body, Recover from Pain, and Achieve Optimal Performance. We'll see you next week.